But the waiter, ignoring the man, turned to the Queen. "Actually, Your Majesty, perhaps you should step into the kitchen. There may be a suitable corner for you there. If you wash the dishes, perhaps we can save you a plate." The Queen slowly closed the menu, her eyes fixed on the waiter's face. Now it was time to answer. One morning, Queen Elizabeth decided to go to a small restaurant in London for a normal day. She put on a simple dress and went out, accompanied only by a few security guards. Queen Elizabeth wanted to spend a happy day with the people. When she walked through the door of the restaurant, everything looked quite ordinary. Inside, customers were chatting. Waiters were taking orders from new customers and wiping down empty tables. The Queen saw a small and quiet corner in the center of the restaurant and headed there. The other tables were quite full. As the Queen sat at the table and looked at the menu, she suddenly realized that one of the waiters was looking at her. From the moment Queen Elizabeth entered the door of the restaurant, all eyes were on her. But the waiter's expression was blank. He did not recognize her, or perhaps he did, but pretended not to. However, the Queen's elegant posture and noble demeanor were enough to recognize who she was. The Queen had told the security guards who came with her to sit at another table. Therefore, she thought that it was not usual for a queen to sit alone at the table. Maybe that was why the waiter did not recognize the Queen. While Queen Elizabeth was contemplating this situation and glancing through the pages while holding the menu elegantly, the waiter approached her table like a shadow. The waiter stood with his arms folded across his chest and a faint smile on his face. Tilting his head slightly to one side, he eyed the Queen, then gave a mocking laugh. "Wow," he said, raising his voice a little. "I can't believe my eyes. His Majesty is in our humble restaurant. Who knows, perhaps the royal cuisine no longer satisfies." Contrary to popular belief, the waiter had recognized the Queen and was disrespecting her, knowing who she was. The surrounding customers slowly turned their heads to watch what was happening. Some were whispering. Some were waiting with curiosity to see where the conversation would lead. The waiter seemed to enjoy this attention. When the Queen looked up at him, her eyes were gentle but determined. "Good afternoon," he said in a soft voice. "I just want to order, like any other customer." But the waiter ignored the Queen's words and continued talking. "But there is a problem, Your Majesty," he said with feigned regret. "This is not your palace. You cannot expect special service here. I'm sorry, but all the tables are full." The Queen's eyes traveled around the restaurant. Most of the tables were full, but at least 2 were empty. It was obvious that the waiter had deliberately lied. "I think you are mistaken," the Queen said calmly. "I see empty tables here and there." The waiter turned his head and glanced out of the corner of his eye at the tables she had mentioned, but his expression never wavered. "Oh, those tables," he said with a grin. "They are reserved. I'm afraid we don't have room for you." Meanwhile, a few customers continued to watch in amazement. Some marveled at the waiter's courage, others were visibly annoyed. As if continuing to test the Queen's patience, the waiter leaned over the table. "I think," he said, lowering his voice a little, "you'd better go to a fast food restaurant. You can get something right away without waiting in a queue. It would be more convenient for a busy person like you, wouldn't it?" The Queen's patience was beginning to wear thin, but she had been trained well enough not to show it from the outside. "This is a restaurant, isn't it?" she asked, just as calmly. The waiter shrugged and nodded sarcastically. "Of course, but not for everyone." An old man sitting in a corner, frowning, could not stand this disrespect any longer. "It's a shame," he said to the waiter. "You can't treat a customer like that, Queen or not." But the waiter ignored the man and turned to the Queen. "Actually, Your Majesty, perhaps you should go into the kitchen. There may be a convenient corner for you there. If you wash the dishes, perhaps we can save you a plate." At this remark, there was a short silence in the restaurant, so much so that even the sound of cutlery could no longer be heard. A few customers looked at each other in astonishment, some shaking their heads in anger. However, Queen Elizabeth's expression did not change. The Queen slowly closed the menu and fixed her eyes on the waiter's face. Now it was time to answer. "So, you suggest I go to the kitchen?" he said, his voice at once decisive and sharp. "To do the washing up? Interesting. Of all the duties I have undertaken in my life, serving my people has always been at the forefront. However, it may be difficult to explain this to someone who does not know what it means to serve." The mocking expression on the waiter's face disappeared for a moment. The Queen continued, "True power is not in looking down on people, but in respecting them. A person's status or dress should not determine how you treat them, because remember, someone you despise today may teach you the biggest lesson of your life tomorrow." The other customers in the restaurant were listening attentively to the Queen. A few nodded their heads in agreement, while others watched the effect of the Queen's words on the waiter's face. The Queen slowly got up from her chair, picked up her bag, and headed for the door. Just as she was leaving, she paused for a moment, looked at the waiter one last time, and smiled slightly. "The pity for you is that I am leaving here with my dignity intact, but you have humbled yourself by succumbing to your arrogance." In silence, as the Queen walked out of the door, those inside admired her. The waiter stood frozen, ashamed of what he had said.